There's a certain irony in building a shopping center to keep your city from becoming an outpost, only to watch it become one anyway. Now, by Westward standards, the shopping center has been a massive success. Every unit's leased, stores are packed, and land values around it have soared, making luxury apartments viable. And they happen to own all the land. And the buzz and tax revenue created by the project have given Mayor Beacon the political capital he needs to push for something much bigger, a brand new civic core in Segunda Beach. But the city's planner, Jack Norland, remains skeptical. He recently ran a parking study and found that more than 75% of the spaces at the shopping center sit empty most of the time. And after analyzing mobility data, he found that most shoppers are either locals or tourists heading to Lake Valley. And don't even get him started about traffic at this intersection. It's already over capacity, and models are projecting even more traffic in the near future. And it's because of all of this that he's becoming increasingly worried that while the mall is currently printing money, all that traffic's going to cost the city and big time in the near future. Widening roads, improving intersections, upgrading interchange, none of that's cheap. To him, the mall's not a model for growth, but rather a ticking time bomb. But Mayor Beacon's not concerned. He's focused on what the city can now afford. For the first time in years, there's money to expand police and fire services, and even money to build a standalone city hall. And with all the prosperity in Segunda Beach, he's even convinced the county to build their new administration center here, making Segunda Beach the permanent county seat, much to the chagrin of San Martin Obispo. All he needs now is voter approval. So he puts it on the April ballot and it passes easily, but not without backlash. You see, the Civic Center isn't going just on this empty land right here. It stretches into the heart of a historic Chinese-American neighborhood, and plans call for 4 blocks of homes and small businesses to be eliminated for the project. Ralph Long, a longtime community leader, fought as hard as he could to stop it. He organized neighbors, proposed alternatives, and tried to save a piece of the city that's been around since its founding. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. And now, it's too late. And that's because the city has already started acquiring properties. And for those who won't sell, eminent domain is on the table. And before too long, half the neighborhood is gone and the land completely cleared. And today, construction begins on the new City Services Center. We'll build a new city hall, a police headquarters, and a new fire station. We'll also add the new county administration building and add parks and plazas around all these new facilities. Then, we'll redevelop any remaining land. And by the end, we'll have an important but controversial addition to the city. And if you're excited to finally build city services, hit the like button. If you're more curious about Ralph, hit the like button for that too, and let me know how you feel in the comments below. Or just leave an emoji that represents Mayor Beacon for the sake of engagement. But before we jump in, I want to talk about my dog for a minute. This is Banjo. He's our 10-year-old healer. We rescued him as a puppy, and he's been a huge part of our family ever since. So it probably won't surprise you that I try to take really good care of him. And that's where today's video sponsor, the Farmer's Dog, comes in. The Farmer's Dog is real, healthy, fresh dog food made from human-grade ingredients, and Banjo absolutely loves it. Since switching, he's been way happier. He gets excited for every meal, and kind of surprisingly, he's completely stopped begging for table scraps. I've been a subscriber for a while now. In fact, the food he's eating here is not part of the sponsorship, it's from my personal box. But it's not just me and Banjo that love the Farmer's Dog. Both my vet and kennel gave it their seals of approval when I told them that we switched Banjo to it. And ordering is simple. You just tell them about your dog and they send you pre-portioned, fresh meals straight to your door. It's fast, it's easy, and the quality is outstanding. And right now, you can get 50% off your first box using my link. You'll also get free shipping and 24/7 customer support. And using that link not only scores you a sweet deal, but it also helps to support the channel. A huge thank you to the Farmer's Dog for sponsoring another video. Now let's get back to it. Let's begin by talking about the plan for today's build. And really, there are 2 separate builds that we're going to be taking on. The first is going to be our city services complex right here. This will have basically every city service that the city could need, with the exception of one, our fire department. We're going to be building that in our second build right over here. But first, for our city services complex, I've got pretty extensive plans. We're going to be building our county uses right here. That'll be an administrative services center and a courthouse. Right here, we're going to be building our city hall. Next to that, we'll have some mixed use. Beneath that, we'll have even more mixed use and some higher density residential and a transit center right here, basically in the center of the neighborhood. Underneath that, we're going to have a welfare office. And underneath that, we're going to have our police headquarters. Now right here, I want to have a large park that basically opens up a view right to the ocean and also makes it easier to be a pedestrian in the neighborhood. Right here, I want to have some tourism and employment-focused uses. So think of things like a theater, something that would make people who are coming in from the port want to stay in Segunda Beach rather than go to Lake Valley. For For this block right here, we're gonna have a really utilitarian use. We're gonna have a post office. It's something that I think that we need to have in the city, and this is as good a spot as any, right near the rest of our city services. Then we have an infill opportunity right here, and I wanna have some higher density residential uses. So we're gonna try to get creative and make something that fits perfectly within this little triangle. And then as a part of this project, we're gonna have 2 redevelopment projects. One right here where we redevelop some of these townhomes into structured parking that will serve both the city hall and the county buildings. And then right here where we have our existing police station, we're gonna redevelop this into a signature office building. Now for our fire station, we're going to be acquiring some land over here for our fire station and building a disaster response across the street from it. This will allow us to finally take care of some of the buildings that have burnt down throughout the community. Now, where our existing firehouse is, because the city already owns the land, we're going to build affordable housing. So we're likely going to build something fairly substantial, potentially from the China region pack. And to serve that, we're also going to need to build an elementary school, which I think we're going to build right about here. And that project will lead us to redevelop a little bit of this area so that we have parking for that school. So there will be quite a lot happening in this area as well. So with our plan in place, let's get building our city services complex. Before we can get started on our city services complex, we have to unlock some buildings. Starting out with the welfare office and the city hall. We're also going to need the police headquarters. And underneath fire and rescue, we're also going to need the fire station. And even after all of that, we have 63 development points available to us. Now I want to start right here with our county uses, but before I place anything, I just want to show you what we're going to be contending with. We have a lot of grade on all of these sites. So we're going to need to create retaining walls and things of that nature if we want this to look any good. So I'm going to place our administrative services center for the county first. And for this, we're going to be using the modern city hall that came with modern architecture. Right here, I want to place the Eastern European office building, and that will act as our courthouse. I've already used this once, so I'm going to have to search for it. We actually placed this at the university. We're also going to place it right here. So now let's make this look good. And the first thing that I want to do is add retaining walls. So using Anarchy, I'll add a retaining wall to this block and this one as well. And then I just want to bring everything up to street level right here. And then taper things off back here. Now I'm going to line this entire building with a pedestrian path, and this will have 2 purposes for us. First of all, it'll kind of complete the look of this right here. And that looks nice and clean now. But right here, what it's going to do for us is give us the opportunity to place a retaining wall, which should allow us to flatten the area behind this building. And I had to be patient, but I think that this looks pretty darn good right now. And then finally, we have this kind of awkward parcel right here, and I've got 2 ideas for this. First, let's add a path to link up the county building to this road right here. This will also give us the opportunity to remove this key wall right here. I'm going to add one right along here. I'm going to use move it just to make sure that all of my nodes are where they should be. And then right here, I think I'm going to add some residential. So I'm going to go with a southwest medium density building right here, but I've got some zoning things happening right here. So I'm going to use art to remove this first. And art says no, there will be zoning there. So old trusty, the path to control zoning. And while that's filling in, I'm also going to add a park in this area, and I'll put in a fairly basic playground. I'm honestly pretty pleased with the building that spawned in. The only thing I want to change is its placement. I'm going to give the county building a little bit more space, so I'll just bump this over just a little ways. Now I want to make some modifications to these buildings. In particular, there's parking right out front, and I really dislike that about these buildings. So we're going to remove this. And then the final thing I want to do in this block is add some parks where we used to have parking right here. I think it'll help make this area feel a little bit more filled in, and it'll also just bring some activity and life to this site. And I think that that is looking outstanding. The only thing we have to do is name everything. So here we have the Segunda County Courthouse, and here we have Segunda County Administrative Services. So now let's finally build our City Hall, and that's gonna go right about here. And for this one, I wanna use the Japanese City Office. This is another asset that has a whole bunch of parking up front, so we are going to deconstruct this once again. So the first thing I wanna do is get rid of that parking surface. Then we'll sort by remove markers and remove the invisible parking. And then finally, these decals. Now, I think that we're gonna need to do something more substantial here because we have the exact same grade and this building is too big for this block. So I'm gonna scoot this forward so that it actually fits within the block. Now I can see that basically everything is in the street. So we're gonna have to get rid of basically everything on this asset and place it ourselves. Now I think we can probably get away with keeping the surface. And I actually want this because it's pointing out the area where we can add some sort of a park. And I'm gonna basically mirror what I've done over here. So a place to grab a newspaper, maybe a bite to eat, and then a place to sit down. And then finally, I want to add retaining walls around here, just like I did on this other facility. But where we're going to struggle a little bit is we have a slope on this side. So I think I'm going to add another cross street. And I gave the building a little bit of space so that maybe we can get away with not having a retaining wall right here, but I'm certainly going to place one over here. Now, I've extended the path around the building and tried to really control movement through here, at least visually, but we've got to make this actually function. So for that, I'm going to use Find It to search for our invisible pedestrian paths. And this actually is a good reminder that some of the existing paths aren't in the right place either. So I'm going to get rid of those first. And now I can place my own. And I'm going to do this completely freely. And with all of those paths, there should be a ton of activity in this entire area. You can already see people walking around. Although the park has disappeared, I just have to use Move It and either bump it up and down, which did the trick, or I could have just moved it a little bit, but that looks good now. And then finally, we've got to rename our building Segunda Beach City Hall. And then for this block right here, I want a bunch of neighborhood serving uses. So we're gonna begin with the art supply store, which I think is the perfect signature building for this area, as well as some southwestern mixed-use buildings. And I want these all to be smaller. So I'll purposely zone 2x2 buildings. And then knowing that we have the grade to contend with here, I'm leaving a 1-unit gap. I'm gonna fill this in with landscaping most likely so that things don't look too wonky. The other thing I'm noticing is that we're going up right here, which is gonna lead to some imperfections in between these buildings. If it gets too bad, I'll drop this node down. My fear is that we start to impact other surrounding neighborhoods if I do that. So I'm gonna try to avoid that if I can. And while these are filling in, I wanna add our transit center. And we'll just go with our small bus station, one of my favorite assets in the game. And I'm gonna make sure that we have our taxi stop upgrade, as well as a couple of station services. The other thing I wanna do is extend what is now Oak Street south, and then add an alleyway right here. Now, this is doing some really ugly things to this block, so we will use Move It to try to clean things up a little bit. And because this is all new construction, and because we have these retaining walls, I think that we can get away with it, and it looks pretty good. Now, for this little block right here, we're gonna have some higher density residential. So I'm gonna try my luck. We have 2 3x4 sites. I'm going to zone 1 to be medium density, and the other to be high density. And depending on which one I like better, we'll go with that for both of these sites. Now for the block across the street, I want to go with urban promenades buildings. So we'll go with some mixed housing, but these blocks are really broken up, so we might need to place these ones manually or adjust these ourselves. Now, interestingly, I actually really like the way that these two buildings look side by side. I'm gonna lock these in place. I don't really want them to level. I think they're perfect as they are. Now, what's not perfect just the way it is this. I thought that this was gonna look nicer, but it looks really disjointed. So as much as I didn't want to do this, I think I'm going to plop this building manually. Let's be honest, this is really the only way to do these assets justice. This just looks so much better. I suppose I could have tried to be very deliberate with the zoning selections here, but my grid was broken, so it would have been really challenging anyway. So I'm happy to place this one block. I think it looks outstanding. Now for this block right here, I want to rethink a couple of things as well, because I just don't think that these buildings look all that nice. So I think I might just manually grab a higher level building and place that here. And then to add a little bit of variety, I increased the height on this one. This is a level 5 building. It's just a little bit taller, and it makes it feel like the building is fundamentally different. Now, the one thing I think that we could do to improve this would be to have an alley right here. So I'm going to try to do that. And I couldn't help myself. I had to keep tinkering with this block, and I really like what I've done here. So basically, I got rid of the corner building, replaced it with some row homes, and made sure that all the wall-to-wall buildings were side by side, and it just feels much more coherent. But what I really like about this is it helps us transition from some of our larger buildings to our single-family homes. And if you want your city to feel natural, you've really got to focus on doing that. Now for these couple of apartment buildings, I kind of like the way this looks in the rear more than this one, but I think that we can jazz this up. To do that, I'm just going to add a canopy covered parklet. And then I want to make this feel special by backing it up from middle lane right here, which is really an alley. And we'll try to make this feel like it's attached to the sidewalk instead. Now right here, we've basically got a loading area and a garage. So let's give access to the alley from the garage. And then I want to screen this entire area in. And I know we're not landscaping and detailing right now, but this is important enough that I don't want to forget about it. These next couple of blocks are going to be pretty interesting, partially because I'm going to be brute forcing some things into existence that probably shouldn't work, and partially because we're going to sever Myrtle Street, which is always a risk, but it's something that we've got to do. And that's because I want to have a park that links up Ventura Street to Pacific Avenue to kind of open up a vista from the transit center to the bay right here, which I think would be really special. So I want to begin by doing a bit of grading, and I'm just spreading out this slope all the way in between these sites. I don't think it's actually going to help, but we're going to try anyway. And I'm also going to take 6th Street and level this out as well. So now I want to add the Passage Park, which should fit fairly nicely right here. And I'm not going to be able to perfectly center this because I need it to connect to the road. And I think that's probably about as far away from this as I can get it. In fact, it's probably still a little bit too far away. You generally need to see that path jump, and then you know it's close enough. But you can already see the issue what we're going to have with this park. You can see that it's great on this side, but on this side, there is a considerable drop off. It looks like it's, I don't know, maybe 5 meters. So there are 2 ways that we can handle this. Obviously, I could switch back down. I don't really want to do that. The more logical way would be just to have the path to slope down. So to do that, I'm going to go into Better Bulldozer and actually delete the path all the way through the park. And now I'm just going to redraw in the path myself, but I'm going to have grounding and constant slope on. And what that will allow me to do is have a path that actually has a nice slope. And there we go. I think that that is pretty good. But the whole reason I did this is pretty evident when you look right here. Now we've got a nice slope. It's still pretty steep. I don't know that this is accessible, but I think it's probably the best that I can do within the constraints of the game. Now, I am going to do something very dangerous and use Move It to try to clean this up further. But I'm going to say that that was probably worth it, at least to me. Now I want to do a few more things. I think that I could improve the slope on this side, which is considerable right now, if I add another path through here. So I'm going to begin by removing the fences outside of here. And then once again, I'm going to create my own path. I'll use the continuous tool. I'll connect up right here. and just do something like that. And that isn't that bad. It's also not that good. I'm going to use move it to improve it. And I think that that looks a lot better. And now I want to get rid of that surface because we can add a surface over the top of this. Boy, you can tell when it doesn't have that surface, it looks pretty bad. I'm going to see if I can do anything to improve this, but I suspect that I cannot. Yep, it kind of is what it is. The only thing I can do is bump this down a little bit. But now the problem is that this path that I just drew in there is actually floating above the park. So I'll just deselect buildings, select all my nodes, and then drop it down. And you know, this isn't perfect, but I think that this looks a lot better. We've got our slope on this side and on this side, and we can hide the rest underneath surfaces and underneath landscaping. So I'm going to move on from the park for now and focus on this area right here. Now this is going to be a welfare office, but not just any welfare office, the Japanese welfare office, and it's not going to fit right here. So the first thing I want to do is extend Myrtle Street. And I decided to have it terminate right here so that it doesn't turn into this alley. And now we can place the welfare office. And one of the reasons I like this one so much is I feel like it looks fairly modern and almost like it could be in a Californian style area. The problem is it's really big. It's about 4 units too wide, but I think we can make this work. All we've got to do is remove the parking once again. And then I'm going to take this thing and bring it up to the height of this road up here and bump it over. Now I might adjust this momentarily, but before we do anything more, I want to get some parking for this facility now that we've removed all of it. And for that, I'm just going to use a one-way perpendicular parking alley. And I'll just run that straight down. Now I'm going to try to pull this as close to the road as possible. And then I want to add a retaining wall to the side of Myrtle Street. And now our final major adjustment is going to be bringing this building to be the same height as the parking lot in the very middle of the parking lot. This is actually going to adjust our retaining wall, which is going to be pretty fun to see. And now, in my opinion, this looks a lot more reasonable. It seems like you could leave this area and walk right into this building. And that brings us to our police headquarters. And for this one, I want to use the Urban Police Headquarters, which is part of the Urban Promenades DLC. And I think I'm going to place the parking at the back of this asset, and that's very purposeful, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Basically, what I'm thinking is I'm going to add a retaining wall along Pacific Avenue and try to bring the building up to Myrtle Street. So I'll Control H this entire thing to Myrtle, and then I just want to make sure that Myrtle Street is level. It's a little bit off. And now I need to take 5th Street and make it level back to Myrtle until we get to the end of our parking facility. So I just want to add a node right about here. We'll Control H this to Myrtle Street. And that is a fairly steep drop off here, but I'm not overly concerned about it. That happens. Now I've got a really nice retaining wall right there. All I've got to do is level things out to Myrtle Street. And now that's looking really good and nice and clean. But here's the thing. I feel like we should link this police department up with this park. And you can kind of see this looks like a gate. So I'm going to see if I can grab a pathway and link up this path that's a part of the asset with this park. Now, I'm not sure that there's actually a path right here. You can tell that there's actually not. So what I'm going to do is draw my own. I'll just link this up and give folks the opportunity to walk back and forth between the park and this road right here. And I want to see if that connection is actually going to work or if I have to actually extend the path. So in the meantime, I want to clean up this area right here. You can see it doesn't really make all that much sense. And you know, by this point, I would have thought that I would have seen some activity and I still haven't. So I'm going to make that path connection. And there we go. I struggled a little bit with how to make this look natural, but I think that turning the path into the road here and then extending this concrete out to the path makes it look pretty darn good. And now we basically have a completely cohesive block here with a wonderful vista out to the base. So we've accomplished all the goals that we set out for this area. So let's switch our attention to this block right here, and I've got some very specific plans, starting out with a bit of parking. I'm going to go with this small parking building right in the corner right here. Couple of reasons for that. First of all, I just like the mirroring of the gradient that we have here. It feels very natural because of that. It's almost as if the retaining wall is following this parking garage, which just to me feels really nice. Then in front of this, I want to add a signature building, the Westwood Center. Now this isn't a huge building, but I think it's going to fit perfectly right here, so long as I face it in the correct direction. That looks pretty good. But the reason I've set it so far back is I'm going to do something that you're probably not going to love, or some of you aren't going to love. I'm going to place parking in front of it. And if I'm going to do that, I also have to remove all the street parking. So I'll widen that, and that'll actually force all the cars into there, which is honestly pretty nice. The whole idea behind this is that this building wants to have direct access to parking, doesn't want to have the structured parking, and there won't be any street parking here because that wasn't part of the city's vision. We want to have street trees here instead. Now for this area right here, this feels like it could have a restaurant, so I want to add some outdoor seating. And I feel like this square pocket park could be perfect. The only problem is the lean. I'm going to see if I can fix that. That'd be adding a node here and then taking this node and leveling it. That fixes it. However, it makes things rough here at our parking garage. So I'm going to try to find a nice compromise, which will probably be something like this. And then the final thing that I want to do with the Westwood Center is change the pavement here because it looks too much like parking. I wouldn't want a car to drive into here. And there we go. That's pretty good. Now, next to this, I want to add an asset that probably isn't going to seem like it'll make sense here. The corner theater. I know we're mid-block, but it's going to fit perfectly. You can see that we've got a really tight squeeze right here, but I think if we eyeball it and deconstruct the asset a bit, we can make this work perfectly. And I think one of the really critical components of this is making sure that you can walk between these facilities. So I'm just going to extend the pavements, and now you can easily walk back and forth. And then finally, next to this, I'm going to place a signature building that we haven't yet unlocked and shouldn't fit here, the Precipice building. Now, the reason why I think we can make this work is I'm going to force the Precipice to share parking with the corner theater. Now, to do this, I've obviously got to deconstruct this asset. So I'll slide this over so I can delete some components. And what I really want to do with this end is just add a gigantic retaining wall once again to level things out. Now we should be able to perfectly center the building and make sure that we're not covering up any of the parking here. That's pretty darn good. So in the front, I want to do something a little bit special. So I'm going to grab a park and place it right in the front. This will just invite a little bit more activity up here. And then we'll replace this pavement. I think that something like that is going to work really nicely for us. Now for this block, we're just going to add our post office. And I'm going to grab this Eastern European modernist post office and back it a little bit away from the side right here so that we can add a retaining wall. Then again, keep things nice and clean. And then for this building, these big back walls are pretty blank. And if you were coming in, you would see those. I haven't added any decals to the mod set just yet. I'm going to. That's something that was pretty overwhelming. People saying add them. I'm probably going to make some of my own decals and add them as well. But for now, I'm just going to add the upgrades here and hopefully our budget turns around by the end of this. But that makes it feel a little bit less plain. And finally, we're on to our awkward little triangular parcel. And I think we've got to go completely back to the drawing board on this one. I was going to save this alley right here, this parking alley, but you can see that we're actually having some buildings that are really struggling with this. They're dropping off in the back, and I don't know that there's any good way to fix this. So I'm going to eliminate this, and we're going to have some structured parking. Now, bluntly, this is not a very big site, so I think we have to go with our small parking building. And one of the things that I think would be a real struggle about this is you'd really like to have a nice 90 on this facility. but that's not gonna work. So I'm gonna turn off snapping to parking and point this in an awkward direction. And then I've modified the asset to try to make it feel like it's curving into the road. But one of the things that I think really isn't great right now is that you can see that there's a tree right in front of this. So I'm gonna try to fix this, and I'll do that by adding a node right here, a temporary node, and another one right here. And that's basically allowed me to create this small segment where I can have nothing but it looks like a light post, which I can easily get rid of. And that reinvents this site a bit. That gives us the opportunity to develop from all the way over here over to this area. And I think that because of how awkward this site is and how difficult it would be to develop it, we should give a little bit more density. So with that in mind, we're gonna go high density in this area, southwestern high density. And I wanna have a taller building in the corner over here. So I'm gonna go for a level 3, 3x2 building. And next to that, I'm gonna place a level 2 building, the exact same building. And what this will do is step down the height a bit. And I should be able to pull these into one another and make it feel like one cohesive structure if I'm very careful. That looks pretty darn good. Now, the other thing that I wanna do is kind of round this side of the block. So for this, I'm gonna go with some medium density buildings. And I think that this will have to do. This isn't my ideal, but I think it's pretty good. Now, the only thing that I think it's really missing is access to the rear here. You can see that there's some pull-through parking. So I'm gonna add pavement back here. And I saved you from a little bit of my madness. I've continued to tweak this and refine this. And the whole reason I was doing that is that I was hoping I could sneak a path back here so that these folks could walk to the parking garage, but it's just not gonna work. So they're gonna have to walk on the sidewalk. It's gonna be just fine. And finally, we'll wrap up our city services complex with 2 redevelopment areas. The first is gonna be right here. We're gonna add our parking garage that's gonna serve both the city building and the county building. So we'll get rid of all of those row homes right here, and we'll add our multi-level parking building. Then we have to add another alleyway so that we can access this back entryway. And that's just about perfect. And now for this area, because we had to eliminate all those buildings and purchase all that property, we're going to allow more density right here. And you know, I think I really want a 3x2 medium density building, and that's just not going to work with zoning, so I'm going to have to find my own. Now, for this building, I don't want this to be locked, but I want to make sure. I didn't think about this before. I just want to make sure these are locked because we really care about the heights in these locations. So that is perfect. And then our second redevelopment site is our old police station. Now, I absolutely love this building and think that we would want to preserve this if the game allowed it. But since I can't change the use in here, I will eliminate this. And in its place, I want to place the round office. This is such a cool building, and I feel like in a location like this, you'd want to have a building this unique. The other thing that I like about this is you can see that our wall right here, our rock wall, our riprap, almost has a bit of a curve that mirrors this building, so it feels like a nice natural fit. And with that, the bones of our city services complex are in place, so let's move on to building our fire station. Now for our fire station, we're basically doing one gigantic redevelopment project. And I would imagine that we've acquired all these properties and maybe have had to use a little bit less eminent domain. Maybe some of these folks are ready to sell their home, considering its location relative to the bus station and the growing downtown. So I'm going to eliminate a number of properties through here, starting with these 3 right here, these 4 right here, and then these right here. And we're gonna place our southwestern fire station. And then I know I have a number of upgrades that I want to apply to this. So I'm going to do that right away. First, we're gonna have our training tower. Obviously, we want to be able to train firefighters. Second, I'm gonna add the firefighting helipad. Now, this is gonna cause me to eliminate even more homes because you can see that the radius is right over these 3 homes and kind of into this one even. So I think that eliminating these just makes a good deal of sense. And then I'm gonna place the disaster aid office. Honestly, this is the whole reason why I want to build this facility, and I'm going to build this right across the street. So now, because we're building a fire station right here, I'm going to imagine that the fire department is asked for another road to connect through, imagining that it would cut response times down by about 60 seconds if we had a road right here, and that might be good enough justification to get this road punched through. Now this alley is an absolute mess, so I'm going to eliminate this, and this is going to really lead nicely into the next part of this project, which is eliminating our existing fire department. Let's just imagine that the city still owns this land and wants to do something valuable with it. Because of that, we're going to build some affordable housing. So I'm going to extend this alley through here. I eliminated this park because it's going to be in the way. And that leaves us with a parcel right here that is, I believe, 4x4. So let's drop in. Let's actually really search for the right asset. And I really want to go for a Chinese asset this time around. And I think that this building right here, it's a 4x4 low rent building. It's tall, but it's not overwhelming. That's going to be the one that I want to go for. I'll place that right here. And then because of the number of people that are going to live in this facility, I feel like we have to take care of the children here. So the first thing I want to do is ensure that we've got some sort of a playground for all these kids. We'll just build a small playground right next to this building. Here's the thing, as I plop it, it's really facing the road and it's serving the public, not the building. So I'm going to formalize this as a use for the building by lining this up with the building and then modifying the asset. And I feel like that should do the trick, and it looks pretty nice. I also want to take this building and make it feel more Segunda Beach. So let's change the color to make it something a little bit more pastel. There we go, a nice pink. Now the second facility that I want to add is going to be an elementary school. Now this is really close to our elementary school over here, but we're increasing the density, and as a result, we need to increase the density of schools as well. And that's going to be especially important because if we take a look at our elementary school coverage right now, it's not very good. We have less than half of the capacity that we actually need. So I want to add a high density elementary school right here. We'll use eminent domain, or rather acquire these properties and build the urban elementary school. And it fits perfectly within this block. Now right away, I'm going to add the expansion onto this, but I'm not going to add that urban playground because I'm not sure that this is the location that I want to do that just yet. And bluntly, I don't think that you should have more than one of those in your downtown area, or maybe even in your city generally. Now we've got to consider parking for this facility because there is none, and I just don't think that that would fly. We've got parking back here, but that's really for the residents who live in this building right here. So we're going to use a little bit more eminent domain, or rather, we're acquiring some more property. And I'm going to place one of these small parking lots right here. But here's the thing. This lot doesn't really make a ton of sense for this elementary school as it sits. So I'm going to modify this slightly. We'll get rid of the fencing, the attendant, and basically everything in this asset. And then I also want to add some sort of a retaining wall right here. And I'll end that right about here. And then finally, we've got a little bit of space right here. So I want to transition the densities down. And I think that townhomes would do a good job of doing that. Now, I'm not going to be able to zone these in because it's a little bit too tight. So I'll just narrow down to them and randomly plop these. That is perfect right there. And we're not encroaching upon the parking lot, so this should be really good. And with that, our fire station area is complete. So let's move on to some transit adjustments. Now for our transit, I don't want to create new routes or reinvent the wheel. I just want to take some of our routes that are currently transferring at the harbor and move them into the small bus station. So we're gonna go route through route and see if it makes sense to move it into this new bus station or if it makes sense to leave it at the harbor. And our first route is Lake Valley Harbor State Park. That is one that I think is completely fine going into the harbor. There'd be people getting off boats and heading straight into Lake Valley. Second, we have Lake Valley to Marble Mountain. This is one that doesn't even go over here, so we can ignore that one. Third, we have Mall to Harbor. And this is one that I think probably should go straight into this facility. So I'm going to relocate this one. And that's our first route in this new facility. Then we have Mall to Lake Valley, obviously not over here. Then we have Segunda Beach, San Martin Obispo, and Presidio Bay. This is one that goes into the harbor that should absolutely go into this small bus station. We had some weird waypoint stuff going on, so it was really nice that we were able to clean this route up. And then we have two more routes. We have Segunda Beach counterclockwise, and this is one that we absolutely want to pull into here. This one actually stops right here at this facility. I think that's okay. So what I'm going to do is take this end of the route, and I'm just going to get rid of these bus stops so it's easier to modify these routes. Now I can just pull this right in here. And we'll do the exact same thing with the clockwise variant of this route. And that's very good. And holy cow, there are a lot of people walking here. I'm gonna let things run for a couple of minutes to see where things shake out, and then we'll make adjustments to our routes as necessary. And you know, I don't need to see much more. I can already see one major modification that needs to be made. We don't have enough bus space here. Everyone's backing up and everyone's going into one location. So I'm just going to add this on, and then let's spread things out. And now let's see if that improves anything. And it's funny, at this point, there's really only two routes that need some help. It's the red line and the purple line. So the red line is incredibly long, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a struggle here, because we're only at 37% utilization. I'm going to assign a couple more buses here. 3 more, and hopefully that takes care of this big queue right here. And then our purple line goes to the mall and the harbor. And again, this is the only spot that is kind of having backups. So I'm going to add one vehicle here and hope that that's enough. And then we'll let this run for just a little bit longer and see if things clear up. And after watching this for a few minutes, things have calmed down a little bit here. We're not backing up into our bus bays anymore. There's a lot of people here, but it's not overwhelming the facility, so I think that we're in a good place. So with our transit adjusted, let's move on to a bit of landscaping and detailing. Now we've already done a fair amount of detailing. However, there's quite a bit more that we can do and that we're going to do. I basically want to go block by block and make sure that everything is as perfect as it can be. So that means making sure that every building has landscaping, making sure that we have lighting, making sure that we have surfaces on every single block. So we'll go block by block and make sure that everything is perfect. And after all that landscaping and detailing, I think that this place looks fantastic. And that means there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. And it's nice to see a little bit of density here in Segunda Beach. It's not a big city by any stretch of the imagination, but seeing it grow, seeing it redevelop, that makes development feel natural to me, and that's why I like doing it this way. Now before we head out, 2 quick things. First, the next episode will be a B episode where I incorporate a bunch of your feedback from both Lake Valley and the mall area. Let me tell you, you guys had some fantastic feedback, so I can't wait to incorporate it into the build. And secondly, you might have noticed that the budget looked really good during the landscaping section. There's really no plausible explanation for it. Well, I did something off camera. Basically, just like in Magnolia County, I had to remove a bunch of resources from the map. I had a whole bunch of groundwater, and groundwater, for whatever reason, is the most expensive resource in City Skylines 2. So when I built the map, I went ham on it. It's basically everywhere. I removed a bunch of that. I also removed a bunch of ore because the mountains are ore basically everywhere. And I removed a bunch of fertile land where we've developed and underneath the lake. And after that, we just have a ton of money. So I still don't like tile upkeep. I still don't like the way that that's handled, but at least we know how to handle it if it starts to handle us, if that makes any sense. And finally, before I forget, we've got one really important thing to do. We have an oil field that burned down like 6 episodes ago, and I've wanted to repair this forever. But because we didn't have a disaster response unit, we couldn't do it. But now that we have it, we can rebuild this. Twice, apparently. But now it's good to go, fully operational, and it feels so good. But with that, I think that we're going to leave it here, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. You decided to hang out with me and build about 10 blocks here in Segunda Beach, and for that, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.